have guests here with us.
Okay.
Okay, we are recording.
All right.
So we need to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the
of the
United
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Laura, can you do roll call, please?
Yes, for Western Lane, Cindy Russell.
Here.
John Murphy.
Here.
Rick Yesney.
Here.
Larry Farnsworth.
Here.
Mike Webb.
Here.
For Scioto Valley Fire, Ron Green. Ned Hickson.
Ned's just trying to log in, if you give him a second chance there.
Okay. Jim Polisi.
Here. Yes.
Sam Spade.
So we do have a quorum for Western Lane. There's Ned and Jim. We have somebody else calling in. We don't have a quorum for SVFR. That's fine. This is just a workshop. No decisions are planned to be made. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mary Ellen Harper. Hopefully you read her material. She certainly has a fantastic background in this material. So looking forward to her presentation. Go ahead, Mary Ellen.
Thank you, Chief. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to share it. You might have to share it again.
Okay.
Oops. Now try it.
Yep. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, you're good.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
And all right, well, my name is Mary Ellen Harper. I had hoped that my partner, Stuart McCutcheon, would be here tonight, but he's recovering from surgery and wasn't feeling well, so I'm gonna handle both sides of the presentation tonight. I am the Director of Operations for Emergency Services Consulting International. And what that means is that I both consult and I manage all of our consultants across the country. A little bit of background about ESCI. We've been in business more than 40 years. We are the consulting arm of the International Association of Fire Chiefs. They actually own 70% of our company. And our focus is solely public safety consulting. We do master planning, strategic planning, station location, deployment studies, community risk analysis, executive searches, hires, promotions, anything related to public safety, primarily fire and EMS, but we are getting more involved in law enforcement and police in recent months as well. We are an exclusive partner with insurance services offices, so we do a lot of ISO benchmarking. And you know, I think what sets us apart from our competitors is that everything we do is a data-driven report. We start with the data, we let the data drive us to where we go, and then we overlay the people, the politics, and the personalities, because data is where we need to be, but if we don't factor in the people, the politics, and the personalities, then we're not looking at an accurate depiction of what's going on in an agency and where they need to go going forward. So that would have been Stuart if he was here. He is our Director of Business Intelligence. And what that means is he oversees all the technical aspects of our reports. GIS, mapping, service delivery, CAD data, RMS, that's all Stuart's forte. And then a little bit of background about myself. I live in Florida now. I've been here 3 years. My career was in Connecticut. I spent 20 years with the town of Farmington, Connecticut. And there I had the opportunity to merge 3 previously independent combination fire departments with a municipal fire department. So we had full-time, we had part-time, we had volunteer, I had cadets, I had career firefighters. And I used to tell my fire chiefs when I got there, you know, on a good day, I could make one fire chief angry. On a really good day, I could make all of them angry in one fell swoop. So, you know, I was there 20 years, 15 of them as the director, and I was the one that merged those 3, it used to be 4, then it became 3, and then we became 1 department. In addition to doing that, I served as the Deputy Fire Marshal, the Assistant Emergency Management Director, and the Emergency Services Instructor for the department. So That's a little bit of background about me. Beyond that, I've been teaching at the Connecticut Fire Academy for 25 years. I wrote their Fire Officer 4 program, which is the Chief Officer program that teaches a fire chief how to be a fire chief. Interestingly enough, when I went to Florida, I took a position with the Florida State Fire Marshal running their Fire Officer program. And it's exact opposites. In Connecticut, I spent 10 years teaching fire chiefs how to do more with less. No new taxes, no new budgets, no new money, figure it out, make it work. Florida is the exact opposite because everybody leaving Connecticut is coming to Florida. So when I teach a chief officer class in Florida, it's benchmarking and trigger points. When do we need to build new firehouses? How many more firefighters do we need? How are we going to make this work? So it's just really interesting to be in a very dynamic difference between Connecticut and Florida. Aside from that, I have been teaching at the University of New Haven in the Henry C. Lee Forensic Science and Fire Science program for about 5 years. And I am a contributing author to the new IFSTA Chief Officer textbook. What I wanted to do tonight was to explain to you 2 of the products that ESCI offers, give you a little background on each of them, and then answer any questions on that. What I'd like to do is preface the fact that we have products as a starting point. We give you a scope of work, but that everything we do is customizable. We're not going to sell you anything you don't want. If there's a part of a scope of work that you say, hey, we're just not interested in, we can absolutely take it out, reduce the price accordingly. And on the opposite side of that, if there's something that you want done that's not in a normal product, we will absolutely customize it. So as we go through this, just keep in mind it's a starting place for discussion. We can make this into whatever you need it to be to suit your needs. So with that in mind, the first product I wanted to talk about tonight was the Cooperative Efforts Feasibility Study. And this is a study where we come in and look at the benefits or the lack of benefit for multiple agencies to cooperate with each other. And I think it's important for me to explain at the front end, my position with ESCI and all the teams I work with, and make it abundantly clear to them, we are not here to tell anybody what to do. I don't live in your community. I don't work in your fire department. At the end of this study, I'm going to get on a plane and come back to Florida. So I don't have a stake in the game. I'm here to give you a data-driven approach and to give you a number of options. And that's going to be based on the data, the people, the personality, the politics. At the end of the day, those options then become policy decisions for you and your board. So you're going to look at these options and decide what's best for your community. And when we look at those options, the first option is always going to be do nothing. Stay exactly the way you are. And what we will do is look at the data, both from the past and then project it going forward and say, you know, if you stay exactly where you are, these are the pros and cons, and this is what we anticipate will happen. And then a hybrid version would be various forms of administrative, operational, and or functional consolidation. None of those dissolves an agency. It just allows for more efficiency and cooperation. And there may be some benefits in that. And again, we would show the pros, the cons, the costs, you know, what options are available, and leave that up to your board. And then the third option would always be complete unification of the organizations into essentially a brand new organization. And again, we'll take the data, we'll look at the pros, the cons, you know, what does that do to your staffing, your finances, you know, what are the effects on that? Does it make the job harder or easier? What does that do for facilities? So, you know, what I would anticipate is if you were to go down this road, we would give you the 3 options. We would give you all the pros and cons of all of them. And then we would leave that up to the board to make a policy decision about what is the best next step for your community. So the thing about ESCI is, you know, we come into this with no preconceived notion. And I would tell you that I'm about 50-50 on these that I've done. 50% of the time I've found a benefit in consolidation. And 50% of the time there's just no reason to make a change. And, you know, I don't tell them that. I tell them, here's the options. But in most cases, you know, it's pretty easy to look at the report and say what the choice is going to be. And some of our agencies have chosen to consolidate and some have not. So as we walk through the process, we're going to be looking at your operations. You know, what are the benefits operationally when I look at staffing, service delivery, getting the job done? And then we look at management. You know, is there a benefit within your management? Are you running 2 management structures? Are they better separate? Is there a benefit putting them together? And then obviously everything's driven by dollars and cents. So we're going to look at, you know, whether there's cost efficiencies or sometimes an increase in costs by making changes to your current system. And then based on all of these, we're going to offer you the options going forward that you should consider for the future. Everything that our company does is guided by standards and best practices. So we're going to be looking at NFPA, ISO, the Commission on Fire Accreditation International, any local applicable health and safety standards, state, federal laws, everything that applies to your agency, we're going to be looking at and benchmarking that. And what we like to do is start with where you are now, look at the benchmarks, see if you're meeting them or not. And then we're going to talk about, you know, whether changing your organizational structure is going to help or hurt you getting to where you probably need to be. So the way we approach a project is phase one is always the project initiation. And that's where we customize the scope of work, decide exactly what you're looking for, what you need to get out of this project to make sure that it satisfies your needs, come up with a contract and a timeline. You know, are there certain dates that we need to hit to make your budget cycle or any other things that are going on within your department? And then what we do is we do a remote data acquisition. We would set up a Dropbox and we would send you a data request for all of the organizations involved. And the data request is looking at your GIS layers for your community, because we're going to do a lot of mapping and show pictures about what's going on in the community. We're going to be looking at CAD and RMS data to see your dispatch times. We want to be able to benchmark the current performance in your community and let you make a determination if you're comfortable with that, and then show you what the possible impact of any changes could be. And we're going to be looking at basic information about your finances, your budgets, your staffing, your contracts, anything else that's going to have an impact on if you were to make any changes within your organization. And then the third part is the stakeholder input and field work. You know, again, that's the people politics. You know, we're going to upload all this information, and then we're going to want to come in and talk to your people, your leaders, your firefighters, the people in your community, and to get a sense of how they feel and what's going on. So the phase two is once we've done all that, you know, remotely, we're going to take that data and we're going to come up with what we believe is a profile for a baseline agency evaluation. We're going to look at your organization, how you're set up, both separately and together. You know, what laws separate you, what common tasks do you have, what idiosyncrasies are there within your organizational documents that might create something that we need to deal with if you were to make a change. And then we look at the management components, your hiring practices, your managing people, your personnel, your code of conduct, firing, discipline, anything that relates to that. And again, we're going to be looking at both similarities and differences. And then the capital improvements programs, we're going to want to see, you know, what facilities, what vehicles, what major equipment do you own? What are the benefits of bringing them together versus separate? And then staffing and personnel, service delivery, we're going to benchmark every aspect of the service that you're currently delivering to the community, because obviously whatever you do, you want to keep either as good or improve going forward. And then support programs for both agencies. That's where we look at training. That's where we look at EMS oversight. We look at the fire marshal's office, any other aspects of your operations that support the delivery of your performance that's going forward to the community and are an integral part of those operations. And then we want to look at long-term planning. You know, what do those departments have right now as far as policies, procedures, strategic plans, master plans, long-term, short-term plans. And we want to kind of compare those and show who's doing what, because, you know, one of the things you want to keep in mind with a partnership is you do need it to be equal. And if it's going to go in that one agency is going to be stronger than the other, we need to account for that on the front end. We need to explain that, we need to plan for it, and we need to manage the expectations of what that partnership could look like. So once we've done all that, we'd want to come out and do a site visit. And the reason for the site visit is we're going to show you what the data is showing us, and then we want to ground truth it with you. We want to show you what we're seeing as far as response times and maps and what we think we're seeing with your contracts, your personnel, your finances, and have you say, yes, that's what's going on here, or no, it's not, and these are the things you need to consider. So that to me is where the rubber meets the road. That's where we talk about it, we see what's going on, and we make sure that our team truly understands your community and what's going on within your agencies. And then as we go forward, we're going to look at some general partnering strategies. You know, again, hybrid, together, separate, we're going to give you options in all three categories. We're going to talk about some of the efficiencies that may be of consideration for you for shared services. And then obviously the fiscal analysis is a standalone overall that's going to show you the pros, the cons, the costs of making changes or staying the same. And then based on that, we would offer a series of recommendations. And like I said, you know, that would then be going back to you to make the policy decision, to look at all the data we've given you and make the best decision for your community. And then the final part of that is once we've done that, we do a draft report and we send that to you for review. I would tell you that one of my priorities in these is that I never want to surprise anybody. Whatever I'm seeing, you're going to see. If I see really bad times, I'm going to show that to you when it happens. We're going to talk about it and we're going to decide, is the data correct? Is it not? And if it's not, we'll get the right data. But by the time you see this draft report, you will have seen everything that's going into it. You will have seen all the sections that are going to be coming forward. You're going to have discussed all of the things that we're seeing with us so that we see it. And then when all that's done, we'll give it to you in a draft report and let you review it. And really what we're looking for is accuracy. You know, we want to make sure that we've represented your community and your departments accurately, because I can't make legitimate recommendations if I don't first understand exactly what you're doing right now. And then once the report's in final form, we would of course come back and make a presentation to whoever you want, whether it's the community, the boards, whoever you decide the stakeholders are. We would be available to make a final presentation in person or virtually, whatever you choose, and of course answer questions. So that was our first product. That's what they call the Cooperative Efforts Feasibility Study, and it looks at the benefit or not benefit of 2 different agencies or more coming together. The second product that I wanted to talk about tonight is our Customer-Centered Strategic Plan, and it's a very different project, also very useful. We have a lot of clients that do multiple projects with us, and the strategic plan is one that comes in pretty frequently. What the strategic plan is it's a 3 to 5 year work plan intended to guide the direction of your organization going forward. So what we do is we like to bring in representation from every layer of your organization. We want policymakers, we want chief officers, we want people on the front lines, we want people that have been there 1 year, we want people that have been there 20 years. We really want to get a cross section of what's going on within your agency. And then what we would do is the same as within the previous product. We would schedule, a scope of work, a schedule for what we need to get done, and make sure that it meets everybody's timelines and needs. The difference with a customer-centered environmental assessment now is that the next thing we would want to do is a member survey, and that's usually completed virtually. We would go over all the questions with you in advance, make sure that we're representing all of the areas that are important to you and asking the questions that matter, and then we would issue this member survey to all of your internal stakeholders. We would also subsequently be willing, if you wanted to, this is certainly optional, to have a public meeting to talk about external stakeholders. Some communities want to do it in person, some communities choose to do that as an online survey, some do both, some do neither, and that's really just a matter of what your personal preference is and where things stand in your community. What we do then is once we've collected all the data from those 2 vehicles, we would like to come in and do a planning workshop, and it's usually about a 2-day workshop. And what we do is we start by coming into the room with all those people that you've handpicked to be in there to represent every aspect of your organization. And we start the day off by showing them the results of the internal and the external stakeholders. And we say, look, you're here to represent what's important to you, but we also want you to be aware of what do the masses feel like? What do most of your internal members feel? What does your community feel? And as we're making these decisions, we need to take that into account because we're here to serve them. And then we spend the morning working on vision, mission, and values. And that's where we look at the existing vision, mission, and values. And we have a discussion with the people in the room about, are those accurate to the services that you're providing today? And if they're not, then we actually take the time to go ahead and update them and do a draft proposed updated vision, mission, and values. And there's a lot of buy-in with that. People really have a better time buying into something if they feel like their fingerprints are on it and had a hard in making that happen. Then I talked about the internal and the external assessments. We'd share that with them. And then what we're going to do after that is we're going to spend the better part of those 2 days coming up with themes. As we go through all of the data that they're going to see from the surveys, usually 3 to 5 themes emerge out of all of that. And we essentially do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, and we talk about what are the good things that we saw within this that we need to identify. What are the weaknesses? What are some of the external threats? And what are some of the internal opportunities? And out of that, we usually come up with 3 to 5 major initiatives, whether it be training, staffing, whatever the priorities are with your people. And then we work to identify goals, objectives, outcomes, performance metrics. And that usually takes from the beginning of that process to the end a total of 2 days. Sometimes we can get them out a little bit early on day 2. But we want to put people in charge, we want to put outcomes, and we want to say, what does your organization want to achieve within the next 3 to 5 years? And then as a group, we create a roadmap to get them from where they are today to getting those things done. And then again, same thing, once we've got all of that done at the end of the 2 days, our team would go back and we would compile a full strategic plan document for you that would include all of the processes we used, who was involved, and have pictures to show stakeholder input and to get everybody involved. But what you would end up with is basically a roadmap of these are the goals that we need to achieve in year 1, 2, and 3. Here's the objectives. This is the person that's going to do it. Here's the due dates. And we recommend plans to check in on that quarterly, monthly to make sure that you're moving forward, knowing that this is a dynamic document and that at any time some of these goals may need to change based on what's going on in your community and with your operations. So the real big difference is with a strategic plan, we bring your people in and we help them identify the priorities and decide where as a group you need to go, what you need to achieve. We're not necessarily there to benchmark you to national standards or give you our opinion. We're there to help facilitate what your people think is important to you. With a cooperative efforts feasibility study, it's more that we come in, we're going to benchmark you to national standards. We're going to give you a report card of such that tells you what's going on in your agency and what we would recommend going forward, for to best position you to continue to deliver successful service. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I can start off. So I think the directors have talked about both of these studies. Could you do, if you did do both, could you do them both simultaneously? Would you have to do the consolidation plan first and then decide how that's going to impact your strategic plan, or how would that work?
It could actually work either way. I have customers that do the strategic plan first. I have people that do it at the end. And I think the question really is going to depend on the current condition in your environment. If you know what the immediate priorities are and you know what we need to look at, then we need to start dealing with those first. If you are not sure what those are, then we probably should do a strategic plan to have those identified. Because again, that strategic plan is your 1 to 3 years. The cooperative efforts feasibility study is probably going to be a more long-term issue. And even if you decided to make a change, it wouldn't be overnight. It would probably be phased in over a number of years. And if you decided not to make a change, that would still probably be a long-term decision that would stand with you. So if you're comfortable that you need to do the feasibility study right now, and you think that's the way to go, it probably would make sense to do that. And then have a strategic plan. But if you're not sure that you want to do that, you may want to do a strategic plan first to align expectations, to get people involved and decide what the temperature of the water is.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the strategic plan is only going to basically take the information within your agency, shuffle it up, and prioritize it, and bring it back. So we're not going to be adding anything to what you already know. But if you're comfortable with that and you know the next steps, we're happy to help facilitate that. Mm-hmm. But it definitely won't answer the question of should we stay separate or should we come together. That's all it's going to do is reflect the opinions of the people in the room.
Yeah, I would throw this out to the boards that based on what you've just said and Chief's question, probably what we were thinking too is we need community input, and we have 2 agencies that need to talk a little bit more together to figure out what our long-term vision is. So I would think, I would just think the strategic plan would be the first thing that we would do fairly quickly. And then based on our more common vision, by the time we're at the end of that, we could determine whether we want to do a long-term look at the cooperative efforts feasibility study. But I'd throw that out for director comment.
Director Yesney, I agree with you completely. I'm more interested in our agency. We have directors from 2 different agencies here, and our last strategic plan was 2016, and I think your firm was somehow involved in that.
Yes.
That appears to be in around March 2016, and we haven't updated it since that time. So we're interested in, our own strategic plan in our district. And as Director Yesney indicates, if that evolves after that plan is developed, that there's a need for looking at consolidation, that would be a separate question. The other comment that I wanted to make is I did read all 3 reports that you provided, West Haven, Martin, and I think, however you want to say it, Holly, Midway, Navarre, quite a few there. I think that the work product looks very professional, but I was personally disappointed in the amount of civilian, if you will use that term, participation. 2 of the studies had none that I could detect, and the 3rd one had 1 person who came to a meeting and 30 others who answered a survey. Alternatively, the last time you did a citizen involved strategic plan here, you had a very large focus group that was involved that was equal in size to the internal planning team. And I think I can speak for other directors here. Our community is quite large and diverse, and we would want to have many different constituencies in the room, equally represented with the internal team. So that would be a goal of mine personally, to we're not just negotiating amongst ourselves as to what our plan will be.
Absolutely. And the driving force behind that is always the local community. So we would never send information out to your community. We work through the fire department, through your normal communication channels, and have your people issue things. And it's really going to come down to what's going on in your community. What we tend to see is that people, especially now with the pandemic, really only want to come to public meetings if they're really, really happy with the service and want to make sure it stays, or if they're upset about something and they want to complain about it. Oftentimes, if they're just lukewarm to it and it's fine, they're not really using it, it doesn't personally affect them, we have a struggle getting people to come to meetings. And that's where we rely on the local fire department and their connection to the community to bring people in. My team will talk to anybody that you will bring into a meeting, and the more the merrier. I just did one in Cape Cod in January, and you know what, there's not a lot going on in Cape Cod in January. I had 42 people there. We sat for 4 hours and they had lots to tell me and I had lots to write down. So, you know, if you can get them there, we'll talk to them, but it's really going to be how far you can get people to come in and get involved.
Great.
You know, the one in Martin County, I personally sat there with my team for three and a half hours waiting to see if anybody else would come in. So trust me, I would much rather talk to people than sit there talking to one person hoping somebody else will come in. But that's all they could muster from their community.
Well, I think the other thing I noticed is that these districts, they had some really difficult financial circumstances like we faced. And they had some of the same questions about how to best serve their community. So that perspective is good. The other question I had is that from a community equity standpoint, taxpayer equity standpoint, do you evaluate compensation levels throughout the organization, represented and unrepresented?
So compensation plans are a completely different product. You know, we would look at them. We could do a staffing study. We could do a compensation study. If we were doing a strategic plan, there would not be any evaluation of any of that. You know, we would be, again, looking at the opinions and the priorities of the people that you put in the room and putting those in order and making, you know, basically a roadmap out of what they think is important in helping you get there. Within a cooperative effort study, we would absolutely look at what you're currently paying both people or both sets, both union, non-union, both sides of the equation at all levels, because if you were looking at making any kind of changes, you would need to see how those compare and determine best steps to make that into one agency. So there would certainly be a focus on that in a cooperative effort study, but not in a strategic plan. The strategic plan, you may end up coming up with a goal that says, you know, we as an organization want to look into that and we think it's important. If that's what you think, the goal would be to look into it, but it wouldn't serve that purpose for you as part of the project.
Okay, so recruitment and retention wouldn't be a product unless we asked for that extra. Is that right? Salary reviews, salary.
That would be part of the cooperative efforts, because we would be looking at that and talking about how the two agencies would fit together if you were to come together. A strategic plan, you're going to come out with a list of goals of things that you need to achieve, but we wouldn't be actually providing any of that in the strategic plan.
Okay, thank you.
Have you specifically worked with an organization like ours that has a EMS side, a fire side, and we are administered by a third party?
Absolutely not. We've done studies for multiple fire service agencies that all had internal EMS. We've done feasibility studies for multiple EMS agencies that wanted to come together, but we've not done one with a fire and an EMS agency that I'm aware of.
So if we start with the strategic plan, and on the tail end of that, would you be able to evaluate the way we are doing business now and make recommendations to have it run more smoothly?
The strategic plan would not give me the information I need to do that. With the strategic plan, we show up, we do the surveys of your internal, external stakeholders, talk to people, spend 2 days there, and I'm only going to know what those people in the room tell me. We do have another project. Another project's called the agency evaluation, and that's basically a report card. We would come in, talk to you, upload your data, and touch every aspect of your operations: people, equipment, personnel, training, funding, and basically just benchmark you. This is what you're doing now. These are the best standards, and here's a couple of recommendations to get there. So if you wanted that, we absolutely could do that. Oftentimes, what I do have clients do is they would do an agency study, get that report card, and then share that with the strategic planning committee and say, okay, these are the things the consultant thinks are things that you should consider making changes. You know, I may give you 55, 60 recommendations, and then you bring your people in to decide out of those things, what's important to your community. What are the things you want to start by working on? And I just did that in Winchester, Virginia, actually. They did a master plan. So it was a 15-year look ahead. They had 67 solid recommendations. They can't do them all at once. So the next phase they did was to bring in the people for a strategic plan and say, you know what, we do want to do almost all of these, but we can't do them all at once. What do we want to achieve in year 1, 2, and 3? And they went and they prioritized it that way. So that might be an answer to what you're looking for.
Thank you.
What's the do you have a ballpark cost for these products?
I do. So the strategic plan, you know, that's the 2 days we're on site interviewing with your people. That's a $16,350 project. Cooperative feasibility study is a more involved project. So we're looking at dollars and cents and looking at laws and, you know, what can you do, what can't you do. That one would be about a $50,000 project. And an agency assessment is in the middle, probably around $35,000. Now, if you bundle any two at the same time and bring them together, we can build in cost efficiencies, especially if you're willing to allow us to come out and do multiple work at the same time. And the reason for that is a big chunk of our expenses are getting site teams out there. So if we were to come out and be able to, you know, for instance, maybe do your agency evaluation, and then when we came out to deliver that report, also do the strategic plan and not have to come back 2 more times, we could build some cost savings into that for you.
Mary Ellen, are those costs for both districts together? I mean, would we split that cost, or is that per district?
So the cooperative efforts, that would be total for 2 agencies coming together. We would look at all aspects of both agencies. That's that $51,000 cost. So that would be the total cost of everything. The strategic plan is going to be interesting, and it's really going to depend how you want to do it. I mean, if you wanted to give me a group of people that represented both agencies and know that we still only have 2 days and that they are each going to come up with goals and objectives, we could run that so that you come out with some goals for each agency and do them together. But you certainly wouldn't have the depth as if you did 2 separate strategic plans. You know, it's really going to depend on, you're going to have to make the opinion at the front end. How much do these 2 groups have in common right now, and whether they want to go and how much is different? If there's a lot in common and they have a lot of the same things, it would make sense to do 1 joint strategic plan. If you're not sure, you may be happier doing 2 separate ones. Okay. And in that case, the strategic plan would be the $16,350, and it would just be up to you if you wanted to have 2 separate sets of feasibility studies and 2 separate sets of reports, or if you wanted to do it all together.
Mm-hmm. So I think if I could ask, one of your planning workshop outcomes was performance metrics.
Yes.
And do those, so I'm kind of used to working with, you know, a balanced scorecard type thing in businesses, which I think this would probably give us, and maybe a couple of financial metrics, which we are pretty good on the finances. The quality side, I think in the ambulance side, we have kind of struggled with trying to find quality metrics, and maybe something related to patient satisfaction. You know, if you could hit those 3 in a few measures, not making it complicated. Is that the kind of thing that you come up with at the end when you talk about performance metrics? Is it a balanced scorecard approach? Okay.
So what we would do is we would start by doing an in-depth analysis of your current response metrics. How long does it take for call processing to happen? How long are your crews taking to turn out from the time they're dispatched to the time they get in the vehicle? And then what is the travel time? And then what is the total wait time from the time somebody calls 911 until the time you have somebody there? And we're going to benchmark that at different times of day, different areas of your community. Oftentimes, especially in a larger area, there's not always equal level of service in all areas of the community. So we're going to want to show you, where are you able to respond consistently in a 4-minute response area? How about an 8-minute? And are there areas of your community that you're not hitting within those performance metrics? And we're going to help you come up with reasonable goals to improve your current response with your R. Now, all of that would happen within a cooperative efforts feasibility or an agency assessment. There is no performance metric within the strategic plan, because again, the strategic plan is us surveying your people, getting their opinions, and then prioritizing what they want. So we're not going to have a data analysis component or any GIS within the strategic plan.
Okay, so I saw task 3D says outcome performance metrics. Is that under strategic plan?
It is, but that's going to be, once your people make goals and objectives, we're going to help them define what is a SMART goal, what's objective, and what's going to be considered meeting that goal. So within the goals that they decide, if they say, we want to hire, or we need to improve our recruitment and retention program, that may be the goal. We're going to decide what are the metrics within that goal that you as a group want to achieve, so that you all know what the plan is before you start working toward it.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Something I've never seen.
I'd just like to say real quick that considering that we spent the last...
Go ahead, Ned.
Go ahead, Mark.
All right, well, something I've never seen is a joint strategic plan. We've done the strategic plan for the ambulance district solo, but we've never really looked at where do we want to go combined and how do we want to make something like that work. And I don't know if we need to do that in a stepwise fashion, but that would be the step to me that would seem the most appropriate to get us to a decision point.
I would suggest that if you're not sure that you even want to consider cooperative efforts feasibility, that could be an interesting way to go. We have certainly tailored strategic plans, and rather than just saying, hey, it's a free-for-all, we want to look at everything, you could make it a cooperative efforts strategic plan. And you could bring everybody in with the idea that as a team, they're going to spend the next 1 to 3 years evaluating steps. And you could decide what things within shared partnerships you need to evaluate, and you could put people on investigating them. You know, again, is making sure you realize what you're going to come out with are a list of tasks that your people are then going to have to go ahead and achieve. So if you wanted to get, you know, 2 people together to talk about staffing and 2 people to look at finances, again, with your people doing the work, that absolutely would work. I guess it just depends how gradual you need this to happen to make people be willing to be part of the process, or if you want more answers at the front end that are going to show you what the finances and the data and the laws would allow for.
Well, once you get beyond that point, the additional question comes in order to do some kind of full-blown merger, it would require the creation of a new tax district, which would require the approval of the public. And it almost looks like the feasibility study has a couple steps backward. I would almost want to see if the public would be open to it before we look into the overall economics of it. Although we're going to have to give them some kind of number as to what their tax base would be. And there's a lot to decide upon. I think it's almost like we need 3 different steps to happen. The ambulance district and the fire district both need to decide that they want to work together. And then we need to get into some kind of feasibility study of whatever direction we want to go.
I think what was interesting about the 3 reports that were shared with us is that your firm recommended different outcomes, but the common conclusion, I believe, was that there were no savings for a merger or consolidation, that some of these districts were facing increased cost, but you recommended something like what we have already, where we have an IGA in essence with a managing business office and leadership. But there weren't any circumstances that I read in the reports that would have resulted in cost savings. Quite the opposite.
You're absolutely
in my mind,
right.
The one thing that is absolutely missing from that is, in order to do a full-blown merger, we would create a new tax base. We would no longer have to go out for a levy. So we would establish a tax base at today's rate, not at 31 cents a thousand. So, and that completely changes the economics of our district. And that's one of the main driving reasons to even think about it.
So, you know, and again, every community is completely different. Yours is different for that reason right there. You know, the West Haven study that you're referring to was a little bit interesting because it was actually commissioned by the state of Connecticut. The city that had the 3 different fire districts was actually in receivership. They were going bankrupt and the state had taken over their finances, and the state hired us to come in because the state felt that if we consolidated the 3 independent fire districts, what the state wanted to do was save $1 million a year. What the state didn't understand was that, yes, they were running 3 different fire departments, but they didn't have too many firefighters. If you were to take away all those boundary lines and look at the number of firehouses and firefighters, they were still right-sized for the organization. So there may have been some operational efficiencies if they had 1 fire marshal and 1 training officer and 1 program, but there was no ability to lay off a huge amount of firefighters because they weren't overstaffed. And in some cases, we do go to places where they are overstaffed, and there are some benefits in doing that. And that's oftentimes, you know, if you're hiring 2 people to do the exact same job and there's not a need for that much work, you're going to save money. But if you're both running bare bones and you're both performing different operations, you may not have a savings by merging.
John, are you talking? You got you're muted.
There, that better?
There you go. Yeah, better.
I'm not in favor of a combined strategic plan process. We offer 2 different services. We can't have the same strategic plan.
Well, John, do you mind me chiming in on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Mary Ellen, hi, my name's Jim Polisi. I'm on the fire board, and I'm retired fire marshal out of California. I've been through mergers. I know your boss, Mr. Sheldon.
Yes.
Good guy.
Sheldon.
Good firm. You guys have a great reputation. It's very unique up here, Mary Ellen, in that our districts, the ambulance district is huge. I mean, they cover a very large area. Fire district's pretty good size too. Ambulance district is currently on a 56-hour work week, 3 platoons. Fire district is slowly crawling up to a 24/7 operation. Service demands are quite high. Fire and EMS are starting to work closely together. We are in an area that is pretty rural, except for we're on the coast. We don't have an auto aid agreement with any full-time paid agencies. Our closest full-time paid agency that has a hazmat team comes from Eugene, Oregon, 65 miles to our east. So we are very isolated. And our EMS program is integral to the overall operation and protection of the community, just as much as the fire district. And what I'm looking for, and everybody knows how I feel about mergers, I'm a firm believer in them. I believe in providing the best services possible to the ratepayers. We are in an area that sees a very large influx of tourism, which means those calls for service drain our service capabilities for the people that live here, reside here. We don't have any serious level 1 trauma centers close by, but our paramedic program is awesome. These folks are really good. And I'm not going to touch on the EMS piece, but I believe in them, and I believe in fire and EMS working together. What I'm getting at is that we know what the future is bringing to this region. You have a lot of people moving in from out of state. Right here, 3 years ago, and the population growth, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you it's definitely going to be increasing over the next 60 months. What I'm really concerned about is that we don't have those services capable to take care of our current needs plus our future needs. So what I'm saying is that when you look at this study and you want to talk about 2 separate agencies, which I do not believe in because we all respond pretty much to the same incidents, if you come together and you talk about fiscal responsibility, can we achieve a partnership that will carry on for years? And I understand the SWOT, I totally get it. But when you come here, will you take a pretty good look at our infrastructure as well as our topographical, geographical, and climatic conditions? Because we do have a UWI problem up here, and the UWI problem is significant. We have a very major highway, Highway 101, that gets a lot of medical calls, vehicle accidents. We've got the dunes. What I'm saying is we are drained for our services. And if we're gonna come together, which I think is the best bet, I wanna see a seamless operation. Do I make sense? Am I talking Martian here?
I think, what would answer your questions is the cooperative efforts feasibility study. And from what I'm hearing, what you're saying, your opinion might be better served if you were to do the cooperative efforts feasibility study to get some hard data. These are the benefits, these are the costs, this is what's going on. Have that data, and then you might feel more comfortable than turning around and bringing your people in for a strategic plan and saying, okay, here's all the recommendations that came out of the cooperative efforts feasibility study. Where do we want to start? if we want to start anywhere. Do we want to continue this conversation? And if we do, what are the first things we want to do to incrementally implement that? I think it's a good point because it's chicken and the egg. If you do the strategic plan, what I'm going to give you is a compilation of the opinions of the people in the room. I'm not going to give you my evaluation. I'm not going to do demographics, service delivery, or any of that. So if you want us to benchmark that, we absolutely could. And the way it might be easier to sell to your people is, let's do the study. Let's get a whole bunch of data. Let's talk about good, bad, ugly. And then let's bring everybody together to do a strategic plan to decide what are our next steps, if any. And that's where your people can get their fingerprints on it, is to decide, okay, here's what the data is. What do we want to do next?
And would you recommend bringing in the labor group on that, the IFF representation?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
From day one, absolutely. In fact, if you asked us not to talk to them, that would be a challenge for us.
No,
we
yeah, no,
want
I
labor,
would
we want
not
management.
want them.
We want
away.
them at the table every step of the way. You know, and again, anytime you're making a change, there's only two things firefighters don't like, and that's change and the way things are. And that's the fact. I mean, I'm telling you, my department was smaller, but I merged 3 departments into one. I was there 20 years. I tell everybody that the pain kind of went away after the first 10 years. But you know, what we need to do is we need to get as many people and fingerprints involved in the process, because it's a lot harder to fight a process that you're part of.
Right.
You know that your opinions and your values were represented in that. So we would bring everybody in from day one and get them part of that.
And what I'm going to say to you, Mary Ellen, is that you've got 2 really good boards here. Some very smart people on both boards. And we have 2 very dedicated agencies, meaning the line staff. But we are not growing to the pace we need to grow to provide that level of service. And that is a very hard hurdle to overcome. Because let's face it, everything costs money. And I've heard it from politicians throwing it in my face when I was on the line. You cost too much and you don't turn a profit. Well, I don't believe in that, because we're an insurance policy. And so we are looking for the best services we can give, all risk, and I mean all risk, to our community and those that visit our community. And with that, I'll shut up.
Are you guys, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. It's very fragmented on my end. So I understand what John is saying, but I think we need to keep in mind too that we've spent the last 3 years trying to get the WLFEA system in place. And I think a strategic plan is going to tell us whether or not this is going to work or not. If we spend some time, I mean, we need to keep in mind that this is really about the taxpayers and what the taxpayers want. And if we can get buy-in from the taxpayers to participate in the strategic planning, by the end of it, that 2 days or 3 days, we're going to have a really good idea of whether or not the last 3 years that we've spent trying to combine our operations and share some of the burden between the 2 agencies is something that we're going to be working forward on, or whether we need to rethink, rather than jumping into a cooperative study or a feasibility study. I think the first line of information we need to get is from the taxpayers, because they're really the ones that we're serving. I understand what John is saying, but considering how much time we've spent the last 3 years, we at least need to give it a good try to see if whether or not strategically it's going to work out or not, and if it's something that the taxpayer really wants.
I think, Ned, you were saying John when you meant Jim?
I'm sorry. No, I was talking about John. John had a different perspective on that.
I see. Okay. Very good.
John Murray. I'm going back like 2 conversations.
You know, I'll just kick in. I agree with that too. I think we ought to try and do a joint strategic plan to see if our commonalities and our future going forward, and if we have one. as Ned mentioned and Jim also talked about. I think that's one of the big elephants in the room that we haven't fully addressed. And we kind of need to get that either in the way or out of the way. And maybe the strategic plan is the way to do that. Mary Ellen, I'm also wondering about timing. Now, I'm sure the strategic plan doesn't take as long as a full-blown feasibility study on the cooperative effort, but what are you looking at for timing? I mean, how fast? What we've got is, I think we definitely want to include our caregivers, our frontline caregivers in this as well. And I think we want to be done by early fall at the latest. I mean, I would say October 31 latest, earlier if possible. How feasible
That's
is
certainly
that?
possible for a strategic plan. And
Okay.
if you were to go the route with a joint strategic plan, I would suggest that maybe you consider a focused strategic plan. You know, if you truly want to start the discussion on cooperative efforts, let's make it a strategic plan, cooperative efforts plan, and have all of the focus be on joint ventures between the two agencies and identifying things that you as a team need to investigate going forward, so that otherwise we could lose our focus if we had too many people in there. You know, the EMS might want a new ambulance and they may need to have additional certifications over here and all these other things that are unrelated. If you're truly looking at cooperative efforts, you know, I think you might want to make it a focused strategic plan on investigating the feasibility internally first before deciding to take next steps. And if you were to do that, you know, contract obviously is the first step. What we would then need to decide is exactly what type of community input you want. You know, I would suggest maybe the survey and online. That way anybody that's not willing to come into a meeting also has the opportunity to do a survey. We would compile all of that and put it in there. You certainly need time to have the community respond to an online survey. And then you need to share enough time for them to be able to make time to come to a meeting. So you're gonna have probably 4 to 6 weeks of lead time waiting to get all that information out. Then it's truly just 2 days on site for us and we could have the report back to you within a month. So if you were gonna start something now, you could absolutely have a strategic plan by the end of October without a problem. Cooperative efforts would be a little bit longer. There's a data upload section. You know, we have the CAD, the RMS, the GIS. That's where we're gonna be looking at all your locations, accessibility, response calls, all that kind of stuff. So that's more about a 4 to 5 month process, I would say, is a reasonable expectation on something like that, because it is a much deeper dive and that's why it's a more expensive product.
You know, it's, to me, we're almost diving into this a little deep. We have never asked our tax bases if they want a merged departments or not. We've never sent them a survey. We've never asked them. There was a small handful of people that come up with this idea. The people that are paying the bill haven't told us that's what they want or don't want.
Well, John, I think it's about time that we found out.
Let's send them all a survey.
Yeah, a focused.
You could absolutely do that.
A focused strategic plan to me sounds like exactly what we're doing right now, or what we want right now as a first step. And it would be to me, it'd be a joint plan. If anybody else has any other idea.
Focused strategic plan, we might hit 100 people. We're not going to hit 3,000 to tell us what they want.
Well, a few years ago, we sent out a survey in conjunction with our levy that was sent to, I think, everybody that we had within the fire med or life med. And that might be something where they actually did a physical mailing. We got a pretty good response back, but remember, it was in the hundreds.
Well, it's kind of like you hear about the political polls. Who's ahead in the polls? I've never been contacted on a political poll. I think we need to do a serious survey.
I think there should be pro and con arguments and something like that. I think people should understand what it could potentially cost, what the changes to delivery of services might be. You know, personally, I prefer focusing on our individual agencies and looking for cooperative ways to work together like we do through the business office. But I'm not sure what the pricing is we're talking about here. If we're talking about just one strategic plan for both agencies, that sounds like a fait accompli merger to me, because you've already spent money on something that you haven't even asked the citizens or taxpayers about. It seemed like the survey should come first, and then we should have individual strategic plans that then would be consolidated if there was a consensus towards a merger. So I'm not sure that there's even enough time in this tight calendar to get different neighborhoods involved, to community groups. I was disappointed in the amount of public participation in the other work products that you shared with us. I mean, 31 people, one person showed up to a meeting out of 3 reports. I'm thinking we have to have 3,000 or 4,000 people minimum participate in that kind of a database to get a consent. You know, there'll always be people who just ignore a survey. I get that. But this is a big question for our community.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that would be more along the lines of that $51,000 report, maybe an add-on. 3,000 people is almost a vote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that would be down the road. But I think as boards, we need to decide our direction as well with some public input. It was more like I was thinking, how do we feel we should start moving ahead? And it would, if you really wanted to do a merger, it'd probably take years to get that done, I would imagine, and really look at the ramification on taxes and costs, and what there are 2 districts that don't have the same boundaries, and there's all those issues that are involved. And maybe Mary Ellen, you've dealt with that before, and maybe it's not as complicated as I think it might be, but I think that would be a long-term process to get a really good feedback from the public. But I was more thinking about, what do we want to do as a board? Where do we set our direction? You know, we haven't really agreed, I don't think, as a board as 2 boards on direction yet. And you could get some public input.
If I could just interject, you're kind of in a chicken and egg place. I mean, you could absolutely do either one. You know, the question is, do you have enough data right now to decide if you want to investigate the feasibility of cooperative efforts or not? If you've already made that decision, that's good. But if you haven't, you might need to collect a little more data to decide if it's even worth going into. I would kind of just leave you with the thought that the difference between the 2 reports is, if we do a cooperative efforts study, my team's going to come in and give you a whole bunch of options and data to look at and say, hey, we like this, we don't like that. If we do a strategic plan, what you're going to end up with is a to-do list for your people to go and to do that work and to investigate that. So the question really is, you know, do you need the time and the ability to bring them in to investigate that? Are you not even at that point yet? Do you need to start surveying the community and doing that first? You know, it's the chicken and the egg. The problem with community meetings, people want data. Do you have anything to tell them about what the effect on cost and price and service delivery is? If you don't, you might want to do a cooperative feasibility to be able to tell them what's the difference. Because at the end of the day, everybody always wants to know, how is it going to impact me? And if you're not really sure of that yet, it may be premature to have those community meetings.
That's one of the things I like about strategic plan, is that it's a template not just for management, but for our employees, so they know what our direction is.
Right, right. I agree.
It can be quite comforting and reassuring because it shows a common focus. It's been 4 years since we did this. So,
Mary Ellen, I got a question for you.
One thing we need to.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Jim.
Mary Ellen, Sheldon Gilbert did a lot of mergers with Alameda County Fire when he was there. And Alameda County Fire is a proven successful program that took a lot of jurisdictions, both fire protection districts, city fire departments, governmental, you know, feds. I mean, he brought a lot of people together, and he did central dispatching. And I know of him, and I know of the success from Alameda County. And what I'm visioning here, and I agree with my counterparts about surveys. However, surveys are seasonal. You're going to get one program that says, hey, yeah, that's great. And then 6 months later, it will be completely different. I'm looking from a fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers of what's going to be best for us, and how are we going to be able to survive as whether it's shared services or a full integration or public-private partnership. We have options, but as board members, we need to make a decision because we are representing the taxpayer. We are the ones that are elected to make these decisions. And if my fellow board members from both sides say, you know what, yeah, it's not a good mix, okay, then so be it. But then you're going to have one board that's going to be directing fiscal for one, and you're going to have another board that's building for the future. And what I want to see is a bridge. And I don't want to see rank and file harmed in any way on either side. So what I'm really trying to see is for us to be on the coast to be a model of what others can do, because we are isolated. We don't have those resources available to us. It's us, and that's it. And we can't rely on the volunteer agencies 40 miles to our south or 30 miles to our north.
And just to point that out then, the cooperative efforts feasibility study is not a merger study. It's going to give you reasons to stay separate. It's going to give you the hybrid. So that may be your catapult point, is it's going to give you as the boards all the reasons you should stay together, all the reasons you should separate, all the reasons you should maybe do some shared services. And then as a board, you can look at that data and say, okay, what's our next step? And then maybe the strategic plan could be that, you know, again, there's no wrong answer. Anytime you're getting input, the question to me is really, how fast do you need to make this decision? How much information do you have now and how much information do you need? If you're comfortable as two different agencies saying we want to stay apart or we want to be together, then make a plan to work together in whatever ways that you're comfortable and do it. If you're still not sure what the best model is, the cooperative efforts will at least give you a menu of all the different options that you guys can pick from going forward. So, you know, chicken or the egg, they're both good things to do, but I think it really comes down to how comfortable you are with data and response. And
one other thing, do you also take into consideration dispatching, how dispatching is done? And that includes EMD and not EMD.
Absolutely. Within cooperative efforts, we have a subject matter expert that will go in and deal with that. But again, none of that's in a strategic plan.
Thank you.
One thing we've been talking about here is to be fiscally responsible. To me, the only reason to consider consolidation, we have to show the public that our services increase. It is better for them to have one district. I mean, traditionally, fire department, what do you have? 15 fires a year? We'll have more than that in calls a day. So, I mean, we have to figure, is the life-saving services and firefighting services going to improve if we merge?
But John, fire goes on vehicle accidents and medical emergencies. So, I mean, you just can't go by fire data. You got to go by potential risk.
Just a minute, Jim. That has happened because the fire department has chose to. A lot of times when they go on call, they're not there medically, they are there to direct traffic. And all of this has to be sorted out. And how can we save more lives or put out fires quicker, respond quicker to a fire to save more lives if we're merged?
Well, that becomes a training and educational model that needs to be expanded upon to the community, because the notion that fire departments just go on fires, that's ridiculous. I mean, come on. This isn't New York City where you got a fire station every 4 blocks. I mean, you're talking about 2 emergency services organizations that need each other for support. If we got an EMS call on the freeway for an overturned vehicle, are your medics capable of doing extrication? No, they're going to rely on fire. And when a vehicle overturns, you have hazmat leaking. You've got fuel leaking into potential storm drains. I mean, the role of the fire service in the EMS needs to come together. If you want to provide good services, that's the way to do it. EMS can always cancel fire if they're not necessary. They can go back in service. But we don't have that capability being separate. That's all I'm saying. And I agree with you, John. I understand the way it used to be, but we need to be looking forward. Where do we want it to be?
Well, I would just say that Mary Ellen's done she's provided 3 great reports. I encourage everyone to read them.
They're very good.
Yeah, Mary, welcome to our districts.
I think this
You
is
know
a
what?
great,
I think you've got a lot of great people with some great ideas, and you all want the best. I think the question really comes down to is, do you have enough information to make that decision now, or do you need somebody to come in and provide that data for you so that you can decide next best steps? And that's a decision only you as the boards can make.
so I think that last conversation was pretty telling to me that we do need to come together as boards and figure out what we can and can't do together and not together. So, I mean, I'm hearing really differences of opinion on how services could be provided with the 2 districts sharing. I'm not talking about merger, but just sharing services. And actually, you know, being a non EMS type person, I'm pretty excited about having the fire be available to possibly even be a first responder to a lot of our EMS calls and what the potential is there for care. But maybe, again, I'm not sure that we all understand each other enough to make those decisions yet. So maybe this is something we could do we have to do some kind of strategic planning about how we want services or what that could look like. Not, you know, what we want it to look like, but what could it look like?
You could absolutely do it that way. Or if you wanted to do that cooperative effort study, we would then do all that work for you, present it to you in all those 3 different categories. And then you as a group could decide next steps from there. So, you know, I think if you've got the data and you feel comfortable, if it's going to cost you money or save you money, if your response will improve or not, then you're good. But if you don't have all that data in a way that you can correlate it together, there may be a benefit in having GIS analysis and service delivery response analysis and contractual analysis just to see what the impact would be. You know, because again, you don't have to do it. It may say, hey, you know what, we don't need to continue down this road. We need to do strategic plans for 2 separate agencies because we decided they don't need to be together. You know, so the only thing I worry about the strategic plan is if you are going to do it joint, it needs to be focused, and you need to be clear that you are just going to come out of that with a list of a to-do list. These are the goals that we need to do this year. You need to look at finances. You need to look at staffing. You need to look at response time. So, you know, you already know those things need to be looked at. The question is, do you have that capacity internally for your own people to do that, or are you going to end up going outside and asking somebody to come in and do those evaluations for you anyway?
Yeah.
I'd like to have some conversations with directors after Mary concludes her presentation.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Any more questions for Mary Ellen?
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary Ellen.
Thank you for your time.
We'll be in touch.
To my fellow directors, can I have 5 minutes to run to the little boys' room? Thank you.
Sure. So we're going to take a little break?
Sure.
Yeah, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever.
Looks like we lost Cindy.
Rick's still 1, 2, 3, 4. Still got a quorum. Although nothing's going to be decided. But.
Yeah, but I think she signed off a little while ago.
Yeah. She's probably getting hungry, just like me.
You know, you could be working out there, Ned, instead of just sitting there, it looks like.
Working my feet.
One thing it would be nice for the directors to decide tonight, do we want to bring in LCOG for a presentation on what they can do for us? They would definitely be cheaper.
Part of my thinking was that we should wait till Rick gets back and Jim gets back, but I was wondering about having a facilitator from our local community. I was thinking of different people who have those skills. I know Russ Pearson from LCC is a very capable person.
To facilitate what?
To facilitate a strategic planning process. I mean, $16,000 seems like a lot of money for 2 days. I wonder if there isn't some talent that's closer to Florence that could help us.
Well, LCOG is definitely cheaper. I mean, they do it, and they're about, look like at least half, if not a little bit less than half.
How about SDAO?
They, didn't we ask SDAO? What did we ask them?
I was just making a suggestion.
Yeah, I thought we did ask them.
About maybe a facilitator that could help us with this process, because if you folks have if you've looked at the last strategic plan and read through it, that seems like a lot of expense for this report. You know, that's how thick it is. It's a very good document, and they helped us craft it. But my thought was maybe there's some local talent, SDAO. George is a great guy at SDAO. Brian Burright, don't know what Brian's up to these days. What you need is a facilitator who can walk you through basically the same process, and it wouldn't be tied to a 2-day time frame while they travel out from Connecticut to stay in our community and then go home. I'm just saying, I don't know if 2 days is enough time to facilitate that. And the other question is, we need a little bit more time to get community input in a COVID era. Normally, you know, we just have a public meeting, you know, in a larger venue, be it the FEC or the firehouse or something like that. I'm just thinking of alternatives. I think they're very professional at what they do, but they have a whole list of products we could buy. It could run to 100,000 pretty easily.
Well, and the other thing we need to talk about, we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
No.
We have a pretty good strategic plan now. If all the board members would spend time, review it, and make notes to the things we think need to be updated or changed, we could do this with the chief and Matt's leadership.
Mm-hmm. That's my belief.
John brings up a good point. I kind of agree with that. Maybe we should go through it and dissect it and see what needs to be tweaked.
And we can do that as both boards together going through Western Lanes, and then we go through the fire departments, and that's going to give us a focused strategic plan with more eyes.
With more options? Is that what John said?
Eyes looking at it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I've got really bad reception here. It keeps cutting in and out.
I was just concerned about her timeline, 2 days, and the lack of citizen involvement in all 3 of the plans that she shared with us. So I think that, you know, all stakeholders ought to have an opportunity to visit, and that can't really be done in 2 days. That's just a shotgun approach.
And
believe they do a survey beforehand. They send that out, and so they have that information, and then they do in-house visits or open up for in-house meetings as well with the public.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the senior board members that have been on Western Lanes board a long time, Mike and Cindy, fire department board, Ned, and those guys that have been there a long time, that have the history when we started to hire, you know, the fire department for admin, what the goals were, what they anticipated, how our services were going to increase. I think we could get a lot done on our own.
Well, a question that I would have is, what do we want to do with this strategic planning? I think the elephant in the room is the main thing. We want to determine, are we going to further migrate or further merge our services or not? And we just might be able to get away with a simple board retreat, so to speak, and make that call.
I think we can.
That will guide our future, whether we strategic plan or whether we feasibility study or do nothing.
And like I've said before, I'm not opposed to moving forward with a merger. It just takes you guys that started the process, and the chief and Matt and Jim that have been around different public entities, to show me what the benefits are, because I truly don't understand what a lot of the benefits would be. We've had ambulance district that has been successful. We've had a fire district that's been successful. Why change now? Somebody has to show me.
Well, if you have a second, let me just give some context as to why we are where we are. We lost Henry, and we were unable to hire somebody to replace him. We had also lost our office staff. We had temporary people in there. The loss of the office staff and Henry at the same time really exposed the soft underbelly of not having any succession plan or any redundancies built in. On the operations side, the services continued without a flaw.
Mike.
The services continued without a flaw. Everything was working great on operations, but the office was in a complete mess. And we went almost 2 years looking for replacement. We tried to hire people to run the ambulance district, and we offered. We did not achieve success in that area. So we finally got down to it to explore a merger of the services. It started out in baby steps. We looked for administrative help, and at the time being, Jim had a person who appeared to be fairly adequate, and she was very helpful with Brian Burright in putting together or cleaning up some of the finances that we had. But from that's why we made the call to say, why don't we explore the IGA to provide services? It would it would cover what we had lost. It would also give us some redundancy and build a little bit of insulation that we're not as exposed as we would have been otherwise. We were not looking for a cost savings. The ambulance district never looked for a cost savings. What we were looking to do is to fill the role at about the same price. So the cost savings really comes to the fire district, because the ambulance began paying half of the administrative costs the fire district was already paying. And that's where the true savings is, but you don't see it on the ambulance side. And now we're 3 years into this or 4 years into this. We've developed a third entity. The third entity the reason we developed a third entity is so that area would have some stability. We wouldn't have the opportunity for one board or the other board to come in and suddenly fire people and lose that position without the other board having an equal say. And that was one concern, because politically the boards get charged differently from time to time. Every time there's an election, you have a different sweep of people, and they'll move one way or the other. So the third entity was just to insulate that. Now we have a chance to do something within to consider a merger. The merger would further solidify the joint operations. But if we're looking for financial stability, we would have an opportunity to reset our tax base. Our tax base at 31 cents a thousand is so low that we continue to have to go out for operating levies every 5 years. That's been our downfall, and it's, at the time it was set, it was adequate because we did not have the Medicare or Medicaid people in the community, and Medicare and Medicaid were paying a full boat. But that all changed, and now without the operating levy, we couldn't survive. And right now, we're also seeing with the escalation of costs, the operating levy either needs to increase or costs need to go down. We're at that tipping point. So this is the one of the main reasons to look at the merger. But then you go to what Jim says, and you look at, for the combined services, how quickly services can attack a problem if we can use a fire crew or an ambulance crew or whatever, or be able to deploy apparatus that we have available rather than rely upon specific ambulance or specific fire. And the coordination, or the ability to coordinate from the chief standpoint or from the operations chief standpoint, makes a huge difference to how we can respond to our community and how we can help the people of the community. And if we go for something like this, and through the operations, we can offer a third crew or an opportunity to have more response, then we've helped our community. And those are the paths that we can go on. I know there's a drive to cut costs, but frankly, we have to look forward to what the community is going to need going down the road. And right now, we're not going to be able to cut it. We're going to have to do something long-term for the stability of our district, either make a call to really cut costs or make a call to fully merge and do something right to make a big difference for the whole area. But that's the background. So I've said my piece.
Well, I would make a recommendation that each board member for the rest of the month of July look to read their current strategic plan, make notes, changes, and we set a time in August to have a face-to-face board retreat upstairs at the fire department, because there's enough room for us to social distance, and we just figure out where we're going.
I'm okay with that.
So am I. Thanks, John.
I think that's a great idea. And these Zoom meetings are really frustrating because I'm only getting like part of what people are saying. But I just want to remind everyone, 5 years ago I wasn't on the board. But I do remember going through the strategic planning that we did with this very same company and the input that people had and stakeholders had, from the volunteer firefighters, which is what I was at the time, to business owners and local government agencies. We're where we're at because of that strategic planning meeting that came about. And part of that was the anticipation of an increased need, not just fire. Fire is actually, as John said, is actually getting smaller. But that doesn't mean that the responses that the fire department is giving are getting smaller. If you look at the reports, the number of responses is actually going up. And that's because the fire department is responding more now than ever to medical calls. Even when I was on the fire department, I'd say what I was doing was not directing traffic, but providing life-saving support, either as first on scene. As our community continues to grow, we have to keep in mind that we can either A, continue to build up Western Lane Ambulance and let them handle all the medical calls, and the fire only does traffic and fires and car crashes and ATV accidents, or we can combine our forces and have two sets of both agencies capable of responding to medical emergencies, which is what we are doing right now. If you have a pager or if you have a way to watch the calls, listen to the calls. The calls don't go out to one agency. They go out to both at the same time. And I'd say 40% of the time, fire is there first. Not to say anything against Western Lane Ambulance, they don't have the manpower. But between the two of us, we do. So whatever we do moving forward, we need to keep in mind that the whole reason that we're here right now was in anticipation of the need that we already have right now. And we need to come up with a strategic plan that takes the benefits from the fact that we have people who are trained to do both. When I was on the fire department, 9 people maybe were EMT qualified. There's twice that amount, if not more. So we need to take advantage of that. And we need to, the strategic plan should be utilizing the training and resources that we're currently, and not dividing them, but uniting them, as we've been trying to do for the last 3 years. So that's my piece on that.
Well, I would just say that these are very exciting times for us as directors.
Yep, I would agree. I would agree.
And for our staff.
Well, I really feel blessed to be working with such very diverse and talented people. You guys are sharp. You guys have history here that I don't. But I have background in mergers and in service demands and response that I can hopefully, help educate those that don't. Because everything is different. And I used to tell my students when I taught at the community college, I taught investigations and prevention and all different things. Every department goes through what we used to call the wheel of fire or the wheel of emergencies. Just like Wheel of Fortune, that wheel spins, and sooner or later, you're going to get stuck in that pattern where you are just going, and you're looking and you're going, boy, we don't have the staff. We are totally unprepared. And we made it work. And just from what I read this past weekend from the fire chief of the calls for service that both agencies went on, I was really taken back. And Chief, compliments to you and the staff for doing what you guys did. But boy, folks, if we ever get hit with something real serious, even this old guy is going to have to go out there and help. And I just want us to be prepared for our community. That's all. But I do agree with John and everybody. Yeah, let's go through this line by line and see what we need to tweak, and Ned, you bring up some very good points. A lot of times fire's first on scene. And when we're first on scene, there's nothing worse than doing CPR by yourself. Been there, done that. And it's horrible.
So back to Chief. Chief asked, do we want to have LCOG come in? Do we want to have somebody from SDAO come in? I mean, George would be a great facilitator from SDAO. I know that there must be some local talent that wouldn't be restricted by a 2-day travel schedule from Connecticut. I think we need to look at some other options.
I agree with John that I think that we have the information, we have talent, we have the background to primarily do what we need to do on our own. And I'm not saying I'm totally against having another agency like come in to see what they can pitch to us. But I do think that we do, given the strategic plan that we just came up with 4 years ago, and given the vast array of experience and background that we have on both boards, I feel confident that we can come up with a plan on our own, spend $16,000, $20,000, or $50,000, which I've got to be honest, I'd have a really hard time looking my fellow neighbors in the eye and telling them that we spent that much money to come up with a plan. I really think that we have what we need, and I think John's hashing through this together is a great one.
I do too.
So I would, but do you think we should, I kind of think we should have an outside, probably an out-of-town facilitator with the skills to lead us through it. And that allows Chief and the staff also to participate, which I think is important. You don't have to lead it, and you can't really participate very well if you're trying to lead people through or facilitate. So I agree. I think that would be good. I kind of look at our strategic plan that we've had as almost like a work plan. So but it's not really a vision plan. So we still have, I mean, I kind of wrote down what are the big items that would keep me up at night as a director, and this is maybe not true of the fire side, but I think we do need to review PERS again and decide on a strategy for PERS. We do need to talk about, at some point, merger. I don't know that that's in the current strategic plan, or whether we want to look at even addressing that down the road. I think we also struggle with and need to hear from the community about costs of our services versus the quality of the services we receive. And then lastly, we've really got hung up on wage comparison. And somehow we have to have a, you know, what do we compare ourselves with? It's hard as a district, again, the ambulance side, there's not a lot of standalone ambulance services, but those are kind of the four things that as a board going forward, I think we've struggled with or need to address. And I don't know that any of those are in our current strategic plan. So I think I agree with John. I think it would be very practical to take our current plan, which is probably more of a work plan, go through it and update it with staff, because staff knows a lot more about operations than we do. I'm all for that, but I still think these things are still hanging out here that we need to somehow address and discuss.
Good idea. I wonder if George Dunkel would be a good facilitator.
Certainly ask.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
Well, I'd like to encourage the board to at least listen to what Jacob at LCOG has to say. I know that he's working with the Port of Siuslaw right now and doing their strategic business plan. And from what I've heard, he's, you know, and there's another local entity that he's working with now as well. I just can't remember right now who it is, but he's from Eugene, and I think you should at least listen to what he has to say.
What if we merge with the port? No, I'm just.
I can help there.
We've been here too long tonight.
I understand what you're saying.
How do we hear from it? I mean, how would you like to do that? If we did that, will we have another meeting, and or can they send us have they sent a proposal and I haven't read it yet? Probably.
Well, you know.
Yeah. Is that question about LCOG?
Yeah.
Yes. No, I sent it to you. I think I sent it to everybody.
I don't recall getting an LCOG proposal.
Hey, Ned, believe it or not, there are community service districts that consolidate fire, EMS, garbage, water. It's a community service district. And they administer it all. No, I'm not saying to go that way. But when I read about those CSDs, I was like, oh my God, what a nightmare.
Let's do wastewater.
Yeah, really.
There's got to be a graveyard district out there we need to merge with.
Oh, I'm sure there are. Go to the town of Colma in California. There's 1,100 people live above ground and like 15 million below ground.
Well, maybe we could we could find out if George Dunkel's available. Many of us know him and appreciate his talents, and we could listen to or look at the LCOG proposal and do another quickie meeting like this and see what we'd like to do for John's format, which is to get together.
Yeah, I agree.
And if we set the meeting up in August, we have time, I think, to choose a facilitator.
And I think I would like to have further conversation on some of Rick's comments. I've been involved in a lot of strategic plans. I believe PERS should not be in our strategic plan. That's a board level decision, a monetary decision that is ever changing. And you'd have to update your strategic plan every time we make a decision on a policy on that.
Well, that may be more of a separate workshop effort.
Right. I mean, it's a great idea, Rick. I just don't need to.
They're just issues that I think we need to address.
I do too.
Mm-hmm. I think we're done.
Yeah.
I just sent the LCOG proposal to everybody.
Okay.
You want to reach out to George?
I will do that.
Okay, great.
Chief, would you send that to John at coastinsurance.com also, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hey, John,
Yes, sir.
are you available for a phone call tomorrow on a personal issue? Coast Insurance stuff?
We
You
probably
can talk here.
should we adjourn the
Jim.
meeting
No.
first?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I thought we were in a study session.
Yeah,
Oh, never mind.
Is
Well-
everybody, are we to where we can adjourn?
We can adjourn.
Well,
To adjourn.
don't hang up, Jim. We're adjourned.
Okay.
Motion to
Okay,
adjourn.
I won't.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you.